Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday Wisdom Circle. Nice to see you. Um, so it's great to see so many faces this morning and even black screens, but faces, good. um, First of all, just take a moment to honor yourself for actually getting up and making a commitment to start your day with a little bit of thought and reflection and possibly some tools to take into the world. I think we all have something in common, and that is that we're here to try and become a better version of ourselves as we walk through the world. And I appreciate being surrounded by other people who are doing the same. So, today, I've been reading a really great book by a fellow named Jefferson Fisher, and he's not an author; he's a trial lawyer actually. And I followed him on Instagram a long time ago, and before he was a big deal because his communication is incredible, and he teaches really great communication skills. And he just wrote a book called The Next Conversation, and I'm always interested in communication techniques because I teach my clients that a lot. And also when I'm speaking on stage and facilitating, it's great to know how to be a more powerful communicator. And his book is very simple, but it's very profound. It He has some really great pieces in it. And one of the things that it was funny because I had just finished the book, and then yesterday, as some of you know, I'm going through a separation right now, and I've been trying to be really compassionate and understanding, and take responsibility for anything that's my part. And yet, yesterday, my husband sent a text about how he felt about something, and I responded with "fuck you, that's a cop out." Like immediately, just. And I've been so gracious and so like all along, and I immediately regretted it. Like it felt good for the second, but then I immediately regretted it, and I apologized, blah blah blah. So I was thinking about this um, teaching today. One of the big things that Jefferson Fisher teaches about is the power of the pause as a trial lawyer, the power of the pause, and I thought I would explore why we don't pause so that we know what we're up against, and then it can help us to bring the pause in. So consider that we're actually really conditioned to pause. Um, the science is here, the science of reactivity versus response. So when we react impulsively and argue rather than pausing, it's often the brain seeking dopamine. We have a strong dopaminergic drive. We want dopamine. It's the neurotransmitter that's responsible for motivation, pleasure, and reward, and it drives behaviors that make us feel good, including validation and certainty. So when we argue or defend our position, the brain gets small dopamine releases when we prove a point or when we feel a sense of certainty or control, when we're asserting dominance, or we think we're winning the argument, or we get the last word in. And this is why some people actually become addicted to arguing or debating, because it stimulates the same reward circuits as other dopamine seeking behaviors like social media, validation, gambling, or sugar. It's the same thing. So if you find yourself argumentative, it's actually a chemical cycle in your brain. And so we have to look for other ways to get that dopamine hit that are healthier for us than arguing. So I think that's a really valuable thing to note, is that when we argue or we react really quickly, that's the brain seeking quick, cheap dopamine. And we can, it's like, give me a hit of crack. Like that's just that quick, right? And if we recognize that, we go, wait a minute, is that really what I want? Because I'm probably going to regret it, you know? Now there's also the ego plays a role. It seeks to maintain its identity and self-image. So when someone challenges our opinion or belief, the ego perceives it as a threat. our worldview, the way we see the world and politics and policy and all of that, we think that that's the way it is. And if someone else thinks differently, we will defend because we're in fight or flight mode. So if instead of pausing to listen, the brain floods with stress hormones like cortisol and primes us to defend rather than to react. And that's because our amygdala, the brain's fear center, activates the fight or flight response before the prefrontal cortex comes online, which is the rational part of the brain. And if we give in to that and we get it going, the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex goes offline. You know the expression somebody like flips their lid? That's actually what's happening. They flip off the switch to their rational thinking. Have you ever been in an argument like with your significant other and you can hear yourself and you're like, shut up, you're being a bitch. Like, shut up. But you can't stop yourself? That's flipping your lid. That's your amygdala going, and you have no rational ability. It's disconnected. And then additionally, the reticular activating system, which is like the filter in the brain, it's actively looking for evidence to confirm what you already believe. So confirmation bias. So for instance, in this conversation, I had a particular perspective on a situation, and then he shared a different perspective that hurt my feelings. And then I was like, F you, you know? That's the amygdala, the dopamine, all of it. So the power of the pause, when we actually feel that reaction and we take a deep breath and we pause, it gives our higher brain time to engage. It gives that prefrontal cortex time to come online and override the amygdala's fight or flight so that we can have a more thoughtful and effective response. And Jefferson Fisher talks in his book about how pausing in a conversation actually creates power, allowing us to shift the dynamic and avoid saying things that we regret. One of the things that I recall vividly, and I think of it often, is my teacher, Barron, when people would challenge him or confront him or even ask him a question about, like, can you tell me what to do about this? He would just take a deep breath and just look at them. And you know what happens? Usually people solve their own problems or they start backtracking. They're like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it that way. Or like immediately, what it does is it provides an echo chamber for them to actually hear their own words and feel the impact of them. It gives their prefrontal cortex time to come online too. So then we have two rational human beings speaking with each other instead of, sparring and defending. So Jefferson Fisher says that when someone comes at you emotionally charged, instead of reacting, take a breath, pause, because he says the silence shifts the energy and can make the other person rethink their approach. It's like when we're in our amygdala, like it's like a snow globe that's been shaken up. Everything's all over the place. And if we keep shaking it by reacting, we can't see clearly. But if we set it down, wait, everything settles, then we can see the situation clearly. So here's 3 kind of ideas that I had around this. So when you pause before you speak, instead of filling the silence, take a moment to gather your thoughts. And I do this by taking a breath. I always just say, I shouldn't say always, because yesterday clearly I didn't, but I am human. And sometimes I get mad and sometimes I get triggered like everybody else. But especially if someone you perceive it as criticism, take a deep breath and say, let me think about that for a second. Like, just like you're not agreeing or disagreeing, but you give your brain time to come online and actually time to look inward and go, like, could that be true? Is there some truth to that? So, that the thing that stung me the most, there was a small element of truth in it that I didn't like, you know? When instead of reacting defensively or impulsively, we can create a mental buffer. So instead of firing back with a rude comment or defensive comment, pause and say, that's an interesting perspective. That's an interesting perspective. When I called Chris back yesterday, I can understand that that's your perspective. I have a different one. And that was a productive conversation. You know, both people felt heard. So I like this idea of acknowledging that someone's perspective is valid. Like it's your perspective. It's how you see it. And I'm not in your shoes. And I agree. That's a perspective. And then to pause and listen more deeply, remember that silence invites more depth in conversations. The more you pause, the more people reveal. So instead of jumping in with advice, because that's also a dopamine hit that we get giving advice, let the other person fully express themselves and say, like, tell me more about that and pause. So I got a couple of questions for you to consider. When was the last time you reacted too quickly and regretted it? Like even in emails, do you guys get this? Like somebody sends an email and you immediately start typing an email back or the text and then you're like, delete. Okay. We do that. And even for me with business emails, if somebody's got something wrong at the yoga studio, they'll send me an email. And sometimes I go like, well, it's like in my mind, I'm like, it's just this, like, you just do this. And like it's automatic to want to just fix the thing and get it done. And I just take a pause and it doesn't need to be answered right this minute. I need to look at it when I have time to be thoughtful about it. And then how would the situation have been different if you had paused? How would the situation have been different if you had paused? And then what's one situation in your life where you can practice the power of the pause this week? Now, the place where I find it most powerful, most effective is really when someone uh, gives me feedback that I perceive as criticism, or someone's asking for advice. Those are two or presenting a problem rather. So complaining. If someone's complaining, notice that you will try to fix it, turn it positive, do something about it. What if you just paused? What if you just took a breath and that's it? How would it be different? So I invite you to think about that this week and see if you can incorporate the power of the pause and see its true power in your interactions and watch the difference, what happens in your body from this like lid flipped to, okay, I'm a rational human now. What's the outcome that I want? And what would lead me towards that outcome? Because we don't have access to that when we're reacting. So we're going to meditate. If you would like to join in the meditation, I invite you to sit up nice and tall. Close your eyes and take a long, deep breath in through your nose. Pause at the top of the breath and let it out. Now notice any sensations in your body. And then breathe deeply again in through your nose. Pause for 4, 3, 2, and empty. 4, 3, 2, 1. Breathe in and pause at the top. We'll hold just a little bit longer. Hold the breath up there. Hold it. And you'll have the urge to let go, but it will pass. Now empty. Hold at the bottom. And you'll have the urge to breathe in, witness it, stay in the pause, and now breathe in and out. Let your mind witness your breath flowing freely. Then bring your attention to your feet. Notice your feet, your shins, your calves, your knees, and put your attention on your thighs. Now move your awareness to your sits bones and your pelvis, your low back and your belly button, your sternum and the space between your shoulder blades. Notice your whole chest and your whole upper back. Put your attention on your upper arms, your elbows, your forearms, the palms of your hands, and the tips of your fingers. And then bring your attention to the hollow at the base of your throat, your lower jaw, your upper jaw, the rims of your nostrils, the bridge of your nose, the skin across your cheekbones, your eyes in their sockets. And bring your attention to your third eye, the center of your forehead, and hold your attention there. And we're going to introduce the mantra, be still. Be still. Just repeat the mantra silently in your mind without forcing its rhythm or pace or volume. Just like an echo coming from the back of your mind, rising up. And you will notice other sensations and thoughts arising. They're all innocent, but those are just the weather passing by. Come back to the mantra, be still. If your mind wandered, come back to the mantra. Now, gently release the mantra and visualize yourself standing in the middle of a snow globe. And in the middle of that snow globe, imagine yourself in a high stakes conversation with someone that maybe triggers you. And each time you react, each time you respond, you shake up, stir up the snow globe, and you can't even see the person in front of you or the situation any longer. And now take a breath and say to yourself, be still and let the snow fall to the earth. And you see clearly the human being in front of you, and you see clearly the path forward towards what you want to create. Between stimulus and response, there is space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Pull your awareness back to your body and take a long, deep breath in through your nose. Let it out your mouth. Let your eyes flutter open.